All right, it's another episode of The Summer of Me, and we are talking about money. We're talking specifically about how to make money without selling nudes. I know it can be tempting. It is 2024, and the resources out there to sell naked pictures of yourself are abundant and apparently lucrative. But honestly, you guys, there are so many ways to make money without doing that, and we're going to talk about them. All jokes aside, I promise I have not considered selling nudes, but I do get asked on social media. One of the things I get asked quite a bit is like, can you talk about revenue streams? Can you talk about how you work from home? How you make money as a mom? I obviously am financially independent. And so we're going to talk about like the ways in which I have kind of managed to do that up to this point. And just sort of my journey to get there. A real disclaimer here. I am by no means like giving you financial advice. I am not wealthy, but I am financially very comfortable. I don't stress about money. I don't worry about money. And money for me is something that like I have really leaned in towards and like figured out ways to make it and kind of figured out like my workflow, so to speak. And so I'm going to give you guys kind of the rundown of my journey, but then give you a few ideas on how to make money, whether you're a mom, whether you're just, wanting to bring in an extra stream of revenue to your life, whether you are divorced and you're trying to figure out like how to make ends meet, whether you're not divorced and you're trying to figure out if financially you could have a way to do so. I know a lot of people stay in marriages because financially it's just not, there's no way out, which I totally understand and empathize with. And so for me, I really have done a ton of like research and kind of just dug deep to figure out ways in which to make ends meet. So we will start from the top as we usually do. Like I said, this episode's called Making Money Without Selling Nudes, but selling nudes has never, ever been part of this journey or my journey. But you do see people on TikTok that are like, oh, I made this much selling pictures of my feet. And I'm like, I feel like I have decent looking feet. Like I feel like maybe I could swing that, but I have too much pride. So alas, we are going to go through my job history with you. Welcome to my resume. No. Okay. So I have always worked. We were expected growing up to work in our home. It was like if you wanted to drive, you had to pay for your car insurance and your gas. And it was just kind of something that was enforced really early on in our home. I also have always had very expensive taste. My mom always said, you have champagne taste on a beer budget. Now I have champagne taste on I would say like a wine budget. Okay. I really like expensive things, and I learned very, very early on that the only way to get those expensive things was to work for them and to earn money. And so I started to get like really creative from a very early age. I can't remember. I think it was Nordstrom. It was my first job, but I remember being too young. Like there was like a cutoff in which you could work at Nordstrom. And I was like, all right, I'll work for half the cost. Like I remember negotiating with this manager, and I was like, I'll work for half price, or I'll work like only like 2 hours. You could just call me like help and like pay me on the side. Like I really wanted to work from like a very, very young age. So I worked at Nordstrom as like a cashier. I was a barista for a really long time. Let me tell you, if you've never been sexually assaulted, try to be a barista. I will never forget. I think I was like 15 at the time, and I asked some older guy, I was like, did you want whipped cream on your latte? And he's like, no, but I'll take it on you. And I was like, I don't know how to answer this. But I really like, I would show up at work at like 4 a.m. I would open the coffee shop. I would like put on my favorite music. I met like some of my still really good friends working at this coffee shop. And it was always ingrained in me and just like innate in me that like, if I want to do the things I want to do or have the things I want to have, whether that was like the best outfit at Abercrombie or like the newest pair of shoes or whatever, I was going to have to work, and I was willing to make that sacrifice. So like I would have friends that would just be like doing whatever and like hanging out, and their parents would give them money, and I'd be like, sorry, I can't, I have to work. My parents were incredible, but they were not like, hey, here's $100, just like go do whatever you want. I'll never forget. I went to a party once in high school. Party is like very loose term because my mom was like a hawk. My mom would call the cops, by the way, on if we had a party and she got wind of it, she would call the cops. So like every party that I showed up to, like the cops would show up. I was like, these are my friends, Terry and Larry. Anyways, and I remember one of my friends being like, we left her house and her mom was like, here's a fifth and $100 bill, honey. Just be act like a lady. And I was like, what planet are we on? That was not my world. Anyways, so I worked up until, so I graduated high school, went to college. I went to art school at Cornish and had a job in college. And my second year of college, I got an internship at Amazon. And again, I was not supposed to get this internship. You're supposed to be like a junior, I think. But I bribed the manager and I was like, I'll work for free. I'll take the internship for free. Like if you like promise like to give me the internship like next year when like I'm actually able to get it. So I worked for free. So I don't know if that's technically working. I was a slave for a few years, but I knew that like that was going to parlay into like greater opportunities for me. And I ended up like getting a full-time job at Amazon, being a designer for a lot of years. But in between that time, I had met my ex-husband and we started dating, and I started to kind of like get creative. And in this time I was interning and whatever, and we got engaged, and I was like, I am going to make my own wedding invitation. I was a graphic designer. That was what I had gone to school for. And I was like, I was working at Amazon. I was like, I'm going to make my own wedding invitation. And that sort of spiraled into, I started a wedding stationery business on Etsy, and I crushed it, by the way, you guys. I was like, not like, I really had like so many clients, but the worst client you'll ever have is a bride. Let me just tell you. The wedding business is not for the faint of heart. Those bitches are, I mean, you are on thin ice with every bride you will ever work with. So I did this wedding invitation business for a really long time, like a couple years. And that's not, I guess, a really long time in the span of life, but it felt like 80 years. And then as my life kind of grew and changed and evolved, my business and my like ways to bring in income sort of evolved with it. So when we got married, I honestly can't even remember like the real financial situation in which we were in, but like I didn't necessarily have to work, but it wasn't like we were rolling in the dough and it was like, fun money, so to speak. But I knew that like I wanted to maintain a certain lifestyle. And so I was going to work and like spend the money that I was making. And so my business sort of, once I got pregnant, it evolved into like making baby onesies. And I had like a very, very large business doing baby onesies. I got collegiate licenses, like made onesies and like kids apparel and leggings. I mean, I was like designing fabric. Like we got into the nitty gritty of it. And I like made good money on it, but I spent as good of money as I made. And we're going to talk about this, living underneath your means. It's a wild concept. But I was just constantly like, how can I make money in this season of my life? I had like a newborn, and I was like, what are ways that I can adapt my business to fit like the season of my life? Because I was sharing on social media and I was sharing the products. So I wanted it to kind of unify with like what was going on in my life. And I did that for a really long time. I worked as like a contractor on the side for Amazon as like a designer. And I was always just like really resourceful, like boots on the ground. I was like going to be gritty. I was going to figure out in whatever season of life I was in. I remember having a baby and like sitting in my hospital bed, like working from my phone, being like, I got to make money. Mama's got to bring home the dough. And I truly like, we made enough money that like I probably didn't have to have that, but I was never willing to like live on a budget. Spoiler alert, I eventually learned to live on a budget, but we're going to get there. From that point forward, I started doing an essential oils business with Young Living. So it was a multi-level marketing business and made the best. That was really when I was like, holy shit, like I was rolling in the dough when I started this business. Like there is still, I think multi-level marketing is like, if you're willing to do that business and like be willing to kind of put your pride aside, so to speak, and like sell something on the internet, like it's hands down the most lucrative job I have ever had and continues to be. But I really like learned a lot about like making money in that process and like how to run a business and like how to calculate like earnings and like cost of running your business and taxes. I learned like all the things doing this business because it got to a place where it was like, all right, this is lucrative enough that like I have to report to the government. You should report to the government all of the things. I am not a tax attorney. So that's kind of my like working history. I did the MLM. I've been on social media. I like make money doing ad partnerships and that kind of thing. And here I am now like doing this podcast, which makes $0, by the way. Like, let's just clear the air here. This podcast does not make any money yet. It will eventually. But one of the things that I've learned in this like journey of like all these random different businesses and like all of these different streams of revenue through the years is like, if there's something that you're really, really passionate about and that you put your time and energy into, there's always going to be a way to make it lucrative if you're willing to kind of get into the nitty gritty of it. It's just always been my journey that like I was really wanted to buy cute kids clothes and I didn't find the things that I wanted. So I would make them. As far as like being online, I wanted to be online. I enjoyed sharing my life online, but I also like, if I was going to put that amount of time into that, it needed to be like lucrative in some form or fashion. And so I hired an agent and like figured out how to get like brand deals and those kinds of things. So I really think if there's something that you're like, I love doing this, there is a way to make money at it, 100%. You just have to be like clever and crafty enough to figure out what that is. Something else that was always kind of woven into my journey was the fact that I obviously had like kids. I was pregnant, I was nursing, I was like raising babies for a lot of those years that I was making money, and I never wanted to be out of the house. So I was not like in the corporate field, like applying for jobs. I was like always at home with like a baby on my hip or like in a carrier or something like that. Like that was the only way that like I was willing to work. And so, you know, before 2020, like when the world shifted to remote, like I would have to get a little bit crafty and clever in figuring out like ways to do that. And there were people that I'll never forget. Like there was a woman that started a shoe brand, and she like a baby shoe brand, and she like was staying at home with her kids and like would make these little moccasins in her basement. Freshly Picked is the brand. And she was such an inspiration. She was like doing all these things, and like her brand got so big that like she opened this huge warehouse, and then she was like traveling the country. She was selling Nordstrom and all this stuff. And I remember thinking like, ugh, I don't want that. Like, and so there was this like weird middle ground that I was like, I want to make money, but I don't want to be like too successful to where like I have to leave my kids, or I have to like work out of the house, or I have to like have an office because I've grown out of my house. And so like I was I guess I was always sort of limiting myself, because not only did I not probably at that time, like I didn't believe that I had that potential, which looking back now, like my business, especially like the onesies and stuff, had the potential to be like much larger than it was. But I also just like never really wanted that, like that layer of success, because it was like, ooh, then I have to leave my kids, and that just like never feels worth it. Obviously, as my kids have gotten older, like that's evolved and changed a little bit, but that was just kind of the level that I was comfortable with, and like that worked for me, because I was still making enough money. I was doing things that felt productive and meaningful without feeling like I was giving up on the other things in my life that were productive and meaningful, as in like motherhood. With all of this came finances, and I realized, hindsight's 2020, but I realized also like in the middle of this, like, wow, I suck at money management. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I was the one who like in our home, like I kind of ran the show. I did everything, whether it was cooking, cleaning, or like bills and credit cards and everything. And we never were like in financial trouble, but like we also we could like, I'm like, we could have saved a lot more money. I basically spent everything that I had made at that time. And I look back and I'm like, I just had no idea. And so if you're in this position where you're like, I really want to make money, the first thing I really, really want to like, if I could force you, I would, but I just want to gently, forcefully encourage you to figure out a budget and figure out like whatever, a system that works for you to kind of prioritize your finances, because it is really easy to be like, oh, well, the bills are taken care of, and like I made an extra, $5,000 this month, I'm just going to spend it. Like I look back at some of the things I bought and I was like, all right, go off, sis, but also like, you're not that rich. Like probably shouldn't have bought that. Now I would die before I bought something like the things I used to buy, whether it was like a designer bag or just like furniture that was like just everything. I just like look back at the amount of money I spent on like my kids' bougie pajamas, and I'm like, no, not it. And it's not because like if I would have made things like that a priority, like and budgeted it in, it was just that I was like spending freely. For me, it was like money was coming in and then it was going out. Like that was just like the sole purpose of me creating an income. So fast forward to the point where we moved to Nashville and buy a very, very expensive home. And I realized that like, oops, I actually don't want to be married and I don't want this life. And shit, I have to get a job. When we separated and started this kind of journey of our divorce, I was still just doing essential oils, and that paycheck was decent, but I was like, I don't want my kids' life to change. That was one of the big things. I was like, I'm not willing to change like their lives and be like, mom's poor and dad's rich. Number one. But number two, I didn't want to be like, I'm poor and dad's rich. So I was like, I'm going to figure out ways to make more money versus figuring out ways to cut back. And what I realized is I was able to actually make more money and cut back simultaneously. And that's really where my life, like my financial life changed. And so the first thing that I did when we got separated was I started applying for jobs. I had been out of the workforce for 10 plus years. My last job was at Amazon. And that was when Baylor was a newborn. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to have to like figure out a resume maybe. I don't know, like I'm going to have to figure out something. And so I started applying for jobs, and my degree is in graphic design. So obviously I started applying for some of those jobs, but I also was like, what kind of skill sets have I built over the last 10 years? They say like moms are really the best employees because they know how to get shit done. They're like really productive. They're determined, and they have like a really big why, which is like their family and their kids. And I was like, I surely have like garnered some skill sets from growing this essential oil business, a 6-figure business. Like I was, doing a lot of stuff on social media at the time. And so I was like, there was a job that was like a social media marketing manager. And I was like, oh, I can do this with my eyes closed because like I had done this for so many years. So I applied for jobs, ended up getting this job as social media marketing manager at this company, which is where I still work. And it was like a aha moment for me of like, all right, just because I have not like done traditional work for the last 10 years doesn't mean like I can't be employed and still have like a really strong skill set. And so with that, I still continued to do like all of my other things. And what I realized was like, I can still make all of this money, but until I get my shit in check and get my like budget in order and my finances figured out, I'm not going to ever get ahead financially. And by this time I was like, all right, I'm responsible for all of my own bills. I'm responsible for, when you get divorced, for us, we had like what's called a pro rata, I think it's called. And you have like a split, a percentage split of like, I'm responsible for X percentage of the kids' stuff, and their dad is responsible for the other percentage. So it's a 60-40 or 70-30 or 50-50, whatever it is. And it depends on like the finances that you make. So I was responsible for this percentage of everything with the kids. I just felt like I'm on my own. And like, if I don't make the money, like there's nobody else making money here. So like, it's just up to me. And this is going to sound like an ad, but it's absolutely not. Like I started using this software called Rocket Money, and that like changed my life because it allowed me to kind of compartmentalize all the areas in my life in which I spend money. And it showed me like how much I was spending in all these categories and then how much I was making. So I'm going to be honest, for the first few months of doing this, I was like, wait, I think I'm spending more than I'm making. And I was like, that would explain my credit card debt. And so it didn't take more than like a couple months for me to be like, all right, well, that's a little spanking for you. You don't get to spend $4,000 shopping every single month. I'm not exaggerating either. Like there were months where I was like, oh, you deserve a spanking. Like you have been naughty. And it was so out of mind. Like it wasn't even like I was like intentionally blowing the budget or anything like that. It was just like, I was just kind of like doing what I thought I could do. And like, I didn't see like major financial consequences or anything. And it wasn't until I was like single and solely responsible for my finances that I was like, ugh, we got to tighten the belt here, which is never fun. But what I realized in this process was like, it came with a tremendous amount of freedom because I was like, oh, I know exactly what I spend on groceries every month. I know exactly how many dollars left I have to spend on, transportation, whether that's gas or Lyft or whatever. I know how, like all of these categories that I had ended up putting out there in this budgeting software. And it gave me like a very, very clear picture of how much I was making, how much I was able to spend, how much I wanted to save. And it actually like has motivated me. I'm like financially like in a very, very, very great place right now. And I think it's because it's motivated me to be like, oh, but if I make $1,000 more this month, like I can put that directly in savings, and like watching your savings grow and all these things are really, really motivating. I think for me, the kicker was like, I never was really interested or wanted to like see my budget because it was so much unknown. And once you know your budget intimately, and I mean intimately, then you are way more willing to like dive into it and feel like, okay, I want to make this part work and I want to make this grow. And it gives you this massive sense of freedom that like whatever money comes in, like you know exactly what to do with it and where it's going to go. All right, I'm going to give you the top 6 tips. It was 5, but I added one more bonus for how to be a working mom. But if you're not a mom, these can still apply to you. You may just have to like make your own modifications, just like you do at the gym, or I do at least. I don't know about you guys, but I am number 1 in line for modifications. Number 1, do not be afraid of hard work. You're going to have to get real comfortable, real cozy with understanding what hard work is. I am talking about like random work hours, like doing things that you don't feel like doing. There's a quote that I love that like really kind of pushes me sometimes. And it says, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. And if we're just like, I don't feel like working today, I'm not going to work. Like, All right, well then you clearly feel like being poor because that's what's gonna that's what's gonna happen. I'm sorry. We really have to like not operate in a place of like what you feel like doing and operating out of a place of like what I need to be doing and what like is going to change my life or change my finances, change my situation. Come up with like a mantra or a why or even like a goal. So like for me, it was like when I was very first working, like my goal was like, I want to cover my car payment. I wanted an expensive car. And I was like, if I can make this much, like it's worth it for me to work. And so I would try to cover my car payment. I had like a lot of women doing the essential oils business with me. And it was always like, hey, what is your why? Like, why are you doing this? Because there's going to be times where you just like don't feel like doing it. If you can consistently remind yourself like why you're doing it, what's the reason behind it, it's going to be a little bit easier to kind of keep going, or at least it's going to give you something to look towards. So number one, don't be afraid of hard work. Come up with your why, your goal, or like maybe even a mantra. Like my mantra for the longest time is like, there is so much more. There is so much more. There is so much more. Because I just knew like if I keep going, if I keep pushing financially, if I keep working really hard, like there's so much more for me on the other side of that. Number two is to get creative with your time. It is really easy to be like, well, I don't have time for work. Like I don't even have a desk. I can't work. There are so many things that you can do these days from your phone. Like I am telling you, 90% of the work that I do in all of the streams of revenue that I have are from my phone. And they are in like the random little pockets of time. So I show up at carpool or at the bus stop. I show up at the bus stop 10 to 15 minutes early every single day, not because I love sitting on this random side street, but because I know that if I'm sitting there with my phone in my car uninterrupted, I can get 15 minutes of work done, whether that's emails, whether that's a brand partnership, whether that's a social media reel, whatever it might be for you, which we'll talk about. There are so many pockets of time. You guys, might be TMI, but like, if you are somebody who has regular bowel movements, you can get a lot done on the toilet. I'm just telling you, like, do not be afraid to fit like 5 to 10 minute work periods in whenever you can squeeze them in. You don't have to have like hours of uninterrupted time. Obviously, that's really beneficial. And we'll talk about like some ways in which to do that. But starting small and just like working your way up to some of those things can like single-handedly build your business. One other thing, like in those time periods, I've always like tried to prioritize things we call IPAs, income producing activities. What can I do in this 15 minutes that might produce income for me? So for me, like that might be like, hey, how can I do like a link roundup on social media and share a bunch of links? That's income producing for me. How can I work on a brand partnership that's going to produce income for me? It's easy to think like, oh, I'm just going to like sit here and like add some pins on Pinterest. Great. Like those things do need to be done. But like if you only have 15 or 20 minutes in the day, like what can you do that's going to actually produce income? Send an email to your email list, whatever it might be. Here's number 3. Figure out if you are a go to bed late person or a get up early person. That is going to solve a ton of your problems. For me, I'm a get up early person. If I can set my alarm and get up at like 5 a.m., I can crank out so much work between 5 and 6:30 a.m. After 9 o'clock, I am a certified zombie. Like, don't talk to me, don't touch me, don't even look at me, honestly, because I will simply melt into an abyss of sleep. It's not for me. I cannot do it. I used to be that person when I had babies and like my body was kind of used to like getting up in the middle of the night and nursing. I would stay up till like 1 or 2 in the morning and like jump into the baby's room, nurse, go back to work, whatever. That is not who I am anymore. And so your life and schedule are going to evolve, but really figure out like, where do I do my best work and lean into those pockets of time. Make that sacrifice. Get up a little bit earlier and do some work. Here's a good one, if I don't say so myself. Figure out what you can do with kids around. This was something that I learned like really, really early on. I can package orders with kids around. Hey, can you help mommy put all these things in packages? Put all this in a box or, whatever. There is not a brain cell that I have that can do taxes when my kids are around or billing or things like that take like a lot more concentration. And so figure out ways, like for me, I was like, all right, if I have a babysitter, I'm going to do those kinds of tasks. If the kids are around and I feel like everybody's kind of happy or entertained or just like it's like kind of a downtime, then like let's pack some boxes. Let's do some of these things or let's record a video or something like that. So really like prioritizing your tasks and if it's like things I can do with the kids or things I need to do without the kids, and then understanding like, do I need to hire a babysitter? Do I need to do these things when they're in bed? Do I need to do these things at nap time or when they're at school or whatever? And then the last thing is to hire help. If you can afford it, it is worth it. For me, if I'm paying somebody to watch my kids, I am 10 times more motivated to work during that time because that's like I need to compensate for that money that I'm spending paying somebody. It also gives you like a really clean and crisp timeline of like, okay, my babysitter's here from 12 to 3. That means I have 3 hours to work and get those things done that I really want to get done. And put your phone away and prioritize those tasks and really like lean into getting that done right then and there, because having help is super, super valuable, but I really don't want you to waste it, because there are moments where you're like, I'm just going to go lay down, and I promise you won't feel good at the end of that. You're going to be like, I should have used that to work. If that's your goal and you're trying to make money and that's the journey you're on. There are so many revenue streams out there. I honestly don't think that it's ever been like easier to make money from home. But I think one of the questions I get a lot is like, well, I don't know what to do. Like how do I even figure out like what job to do or where to make money? So here's what you're going to do. First of all, if you feel called to something, if you feel like pulled towards something, it likely aligns with your gifting or your calling. And I really, really believe this. If you're feeling pursued by something where it just keeps coming up in the back of your mind, like, I could do that. I could start a business doing that, or I could make money doing this, or I really want to do this. Do it. Like, do it. I cannot tell you enough how often people ignore those little like messages in their ears that they get, or those little callings. And it's oftentimes because it's something that you would be good at. It's something that you're passionate about already. And it's something that you're going to be successful at if you really put your effort towards it. If you don't know what you want to do, but you know you want to make money, you're going to make a list. Make a list of 10 things that you really enjoy. Okay. So maybe that's working out. Maybe that's graphic design. Maybe that's flowers. 10 things that you really, really like. Okay. And then you're going to make 5 offshoots off each of those things, of 5 ways that you could make money doing that. So let's take flowers, for example. All right, I could start a business selling flowers. I could make bouquets. I could start a flower truck. I obviously don't have all these off the top of my head, and this is not just like something that's going to take 10 minutes. Like it's something like it's an activity that you're going to have to actually like prioritize, but take those 10 things, make 5 offshoots, and then out of those 50 things, I guarantee you there's something in there that you could start. So wellness, for example. All right, well, I really like wellness. I'm passionate about like having clean products in my home. Good. Go sell those clean products. There's 100 different companies out there to sell clean products. If you're really passionate about design, start a business selling digital templates on Etsy. I mean, I could sit here in this chair and go on all day about like the million different ways in which you could make an income, but you really have to do something that is true to you, that aligns with you, and that you're passionate about, because you're going to burn out quickly otherwise. And you're going to feel like, well, this isn't me. Like I'm just doing like a random quick thing to make money. By the way, like if you're passionate about like taking naked pictures of yourself, by all means, OnlyFans is your friend. I don't want to yuck anybody's yum over here. But I really think that like sometimes we just want the answer to like fall in our lap. And it does take a little bit of soul searching and like digging and figuring out like, I don't know. This goes back to knowing yourself and understanding like your identity and who am I? Like, what do I like? What are the things that I'm passionate about? And then how can I make money on those things? Because the goal is that it doesn't always feel like work. Obviously it's going to sometimes, but the goal is that if you're doing something that you really, really love, it's not always going to feel like work. It's going to be like, wow, I can't believe I get to make money doing this. And that is kind of the place in my life that I'm at this point, is like, I get to do a lot of the things that I love, this podcast being one of them. And I'm so grateful that even though it doesn't make money right now, like I know down the road, like this will be something that will bring an income for me. And like, it doesn't feel like work ever, not one time, because I'm so passionate about it. My big takeaway from this is like, I don't want you to let guilt or fear or feeling like you are less than, or you have imposter syndrome, to take away from your ability to start something beautiful, to bring in income for your family or bring in income for yourself, to find financial ways to make changes in your life. You never know in your journey, like who you're going to inspire or who's watching you and being like, well, she did it, so can I? Because likely there's somebody that's that person for you, that maximizer for you, that's going to say, well, if so-and-so does it, like I probably can do that. Or they made money doing this, like I'm going to try it too. So just really put yourself out there, lean into your passions, and trust your gut instinct, because I guarantee you there's a change you can make, and you will be more successful than you give yourself credit for. Thanks for listening to The Summer of Me. You can listen to episodes on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube. Come hang out and follow my chaos on Instagram @KendraForNow. See you next time.